Hello. Well, you'll have to forgive my notes, but I thought I had the morning to learn them. Given the switch, my first Cape gag has gone. I was going to do a Patricia Arquette moment. I didn't think it was politically correct to do that today, so here we go. So I'm really pleased that Peter mentioned the 90-day onboarding piece as being true, because that sets me up to have quite a good discussion with you this morning. So I've got my first question for you, and it is candidate onboarding a standalone topic in your talent agenda? That's my first question. I'm absolutely confident that in this room a high proportion of you will, if not 100%, will have a huge percentage of your budget and resource on talent acquisition, especially those of you in scarce skilled environments. I'm also confident that employee retention is extremely high on your agenda, and it'll be measurable. So let's talk about onboarding, bridging the gap between a candidate being a candidate to then becoming an employee of your organisation. It's one of my favourite subjects. That was a gag, by the way. Thank you. Now we get in there. Brilliant. So a quick exercise, no buzzers, no technology, just good old-fashioned hands. Tell me how many of you are confident, and think about the question just before you stick your hand up, that new starters in your business, so I'm not necessarily talking about just you, but new starters in your business were taken to or accompanied to lunch on their first day. Go. Interesting. Pretty small amount of people. So what we know from our Kelly UK and Ireland onboarding survey, which we've just recently closed over the last 3 months, so this is gauging starters probably within the last 6 months. We know that a really scary 86% of people were not taken to or accompanied to lunch on their first day. Seems like a really small thing, but if you factor in how people feel on their first day and their engagement with your employer branding and their engagement with their team and their engagement with their new hiring manager, it can be a bit of a scary prospect. And the way I've thought about it is I've thought, so what are those people doing at lunch? Are they wandering the streets looking for Tesco Express? Are they sitting at their desk eating a semi-warm sandwich unwrapped from cling film in their own box? Who knows? But interestingly, what they're not doing is engaging with their new team, and they're not feeling engaged. So this is a question that is going to be asked time and time and time again to your new starter. Not just on their first day, but during the first weeks, months. How's your first week? How's it going? Still enjoying the new job? It's a constant question. And what we find is that most people have a pre-programmed response. Yeah, it's great. Yeah, it's going really well, thanks. Yeah, cheers for asking. Brilliant. They're saving the emotive question, the real answer, for their friends, their family, their ex-colleagues. You know, hey, you know, how's it going in the new job? Are they as nice as us? Like, yeah, well, it's all right. And then they hit the social media, crappy day at work, status updates. People know where they've joined. So your employer brand is already being either positively or negatively impacted by people talking about their first day. It's a big deal. People invest a lot of thought into switching company, into joining a new business. So if they're in a space where the "how was your first day" question is a real challenge for them, I would suggest it's not a great place to be. The question reinforces both the positive and the negative, and we shouldn't underestimate the power of that. So I'm thinking, if we're looking at the emotive element, that humanized element of people joining new organisations, we really need to factor that in the onboarding process, and we need to factor that in how we're going to meet the challenge of the question that continues through several months of somebody joining. Just used the wrong thing. So taking a global perspective on the subject, I wanted to see how the UK fares when we compare it against other countries. So there's a global trend. Ignore Russia. You know, a lot has changed with Russia. Forgive me if there are any Russians in the room. I don't mean that negatively, but the economy has significantly changed over the last few months. What we're seeing is that some of the growing economies are really focusing and investing in best practice when it relates to onboarding. So that 90-day period has become really important. China, Thailand and India are clearly leading the field with planned and structured entry programs for new hires. The UK sits at a global average of, I think, 55%. On the flip side of that, we could say that 45% of people joining new business in the UK do not have a planned and structured assimilation program. That's quite a big message for people to listen to when they're in business and they're spending so much time attracting talent. So I ask a lot of questions of you as an audience, but really think about that and think about all of the amazing stuff you're doing at the front end from talent acquisition and the amazing stuff you might be doing in learning and development and, you know, academies and programs and leadership programs. But that 90-day period is critical, and if we don't start thinking about it more technically, we're not going to improve things. So here's the big question: where does it begin? In my mind, a lot of people think it begins on day one when that person walks through the door feeling shiny and new, and they're, you know, up for their new job, and all the mates have patted them on the back, and isn't it great? But actually, onboarding for me begins the day that person has accepted the offer. They become your employee in waiting, so they're ready, they're waiting, they know they've resigned, they know they've accepted a new offer, so they are already thinking about you as their employer. But invariably, employers are not thinking about that person as an employee yet because they're waiting for their foot to cross the threshold of the door. This is the biggest issue. In fact, I've already spoken to somebody about this morning who, thankfully, agree with me, which is always great when you're standing in front of a room of strangers. So who owns it? And I think there's a real case for saying that on occasions, and there are some organisations that do this brilliantly, so I'm not, you know, casting aspersions, but what I'm saying is that in a high proportion of cases, nobody's fully accountable. There may be a process document somewhere that says somebody is, but in reality, that accountability is not being lived out. So HR will think recruitment are responsible, whether they be internal or external. Recruitment think they've done their job, unless they're external and they're waiting for their fee, and they keep going. But recruitment will think they've done their job. The hiring manager is blissfully unaware because they're doing their day job, and actually they just expect candidates to appear. And that's what we all experience, right? And when they don't, God, it's all recruitment's fault. So ultimately what happens is nobody accepts full accountability. So there's this kind of messed up scenario where your person for a week, a month, 3 months notice period doesn't have anybody accountable for their journey into the business. I know people are looking at me thinking, you're pointing the finger at me on this, but I'm not. I'm just raising the issue. So we go back to my question, and I'm irritating, I'll keep asking it. What we found in our UK survey was that 1 in 5 people didn't receive a warm welcome on their first day. I find that quite sad. 46% were not shown around their new office. I find that bizarre. 48% didn't receive an induction plan. That's the nub of the question here. And a really lucky 4% received a welcome gift. No idea where they're working, but I wish I was there too. And I'm not suggesting that we should start breaking budgets and giving people clocks for joining businesses. I'm suggesting that perhaps what we need to do is start thinking outside of the box and getting creative and thinking that people are talent. So we come to the acid test, and here it is. 20% of people would not recommend their employer on the basis of their onboarding experience. Now that's a problem. And it's a problem that needs addressing, and I suggest that it needs addressing as a key part of the talent acquisition agenda. So it's something that I want to see being discussed at a C-suite point. You know, what are we going to do about integrating new people into our business and how are we going to do it in a structured fashion that demonstrates best practice and competes with our competitors and competes with our strategy on gaining visibility and our EVP ultimately. So during the first 90 days, we've looked at a full 90-day period, which we think is a fairly common standard boarding period. When we consider the high proportion, some 60% of our UK survey reporting a lack of pre-joining information, 25% didn't receive any on-the-job training, which actually they felt they needed to be effective. 29% of new hires were not given any goals or objectives, and an astounding 65% did not receive any feedback or end of probation appraisal. Again, this is all, basic best practice stuff that people say they do is in an operations manual somewhere. I'm sure there's a process flow chart of what it looks like, but people just aren't living out those items because they're too busy, it's slipped through the cracks. The proverbial leaky bucket in businesses is living out and people are suffering. I say suffering, first world problems, but you know what I mean. Just getting in context. So here's some stuff that people did do really well, and it makes me laugh in a way that people think it's great that someone had my desk and PC ready. They did it really well. It's kind of setting the bar pretty low on boarding, right? Yay! I had my phone and some business cards and a PC and it was all ready for me. Brilliant. Why can't that just be the norm? But some other good stuff, weekly one-to-one meetings for feedback, good support, explaining goals of the company, the kind of stuff that worries me that people are saying, my company did this really well, because it's not high-level stuff, it's the basics. This should be BAU. I'm getting on my soapbox now. So these are people's actual comments. Meeting almost 100 people in a day is very overwhelming. No, of course it is, Sherlock. A lot of these items are tiny little things to us as a community of people who are in this space day in, day out. But to somebody who left a job where they were a mature employee, for example, had been there for some time, they've made a big decision, they may have relocated, it's a change for them and their family or a change for them personally, this kind of stuff does weigh on them. It incrementally grows into something that plays on their minds. So here's my plea. Let's get human with it. The human-to-human element is absolutely vital. And we're seeing technology take on so many functions. We're centralising the onboarding process. People receive emails and they fill in their forms online and they scan their own documents and whack them in a system. And that's great, but there's no human contact. So let's get human. Keep in touch. Get the communication lines going. There are some organisations I know that do this brilliantly. Somebody puts in they make the offer, they accept the offer, and then the several weeks leading up to that person joining the business, they receive stuff. Not high value, I'm not talking about Cartier watches, I'm talking about a postcard, we're glad you're joining the business, that kind of stuff. Little prompts that engage that person psychologically with the brand and contract them to your business mentally before they actually join. Pave the way. Make their journey smooth. Give them tidbits of information that make them feel like they're getting to know how it works. There's an interesting article in Forbes about somebody transitioning into Deloitte. Deloitte are either here or they're here later. And somebody gave a new starter some advice and said it'll take you 2 years to learn our business and how long it takes to get to know us. And the person talking about it said, yeah, it did. It took me 2 years. But along the way, Deloitte offered so many assimilation processes that made that an enjoyable and learning curve for that individual. Frequently asked question guides. They're one of my favourite things. They're a tiny little thing, and it could be an A5 piece of paper or a more interesting branded brochure. Wi-Fi code, where the toilets are, lift codes if there are some, any key information where key people are sitting, who the key people are in departments and what their internal extension numbers are. Just the little things that stop you having to ask and sound like you're in, I say 4th grade like an American, but you know, having to ask those tiny little questions all day which become annoying to yourself as an individual, let alone other people out there. An FAQ document bridges those gaps. Hey, welcome to the company. Here's a handy FAQ document. It gives you and signposts you to some key information that might help you in your first few weeks with us. Simple. And by the way, give it back because they cost a fortune to print and we'll use it for the next person. Workplace ready. We've already talked about that, but get it right, you know, get their systems tested, don't have them log in on the first day and then lose 4 hours because they can't get in. And that happens every day, thousands of times, even for us when we're trying to work anyway. So practice makes perfect. Once you've got all this, or you think you've got it, measure it. Now, you may or may not have onboarding on your agenda, but whatever you're doing, measure it. Have a look at the outcomes. Look for some consistency. Mind the gaps. And when I'm talking about the gaps, I mean ask. Ask people. Get their opinion and take a view on it. And then start tweaking, making the changes, making them become a consistent piece of work in your business and making that into your best practice. If you don't ask, you're not going to know. And all that people are going to do is have underground conversations about how rubbish it was with their mates. That causes you a talent acquisition problem, by the way. So this is the perfect onboard. Okay, just imagine this. I can't remember if I've got another slide after this or not, because I've done a lot of homework on this. I have, actually. So imagine this, right? So this is the perfect world, the perfect scenario. Your perfect candidate, A1A, accepts the offer. Every week, leading up to joining, they receive a low-value item, or high-value item, whoever you are, in the post. A fun gift, a squeezy stress ball, a notepad, a pen, a postcard, whatever it may be. It's low value, it's not going to kill your budget, it's a small item. They are invited to a team meeting, and it could be before they join, if that's appropriate. I know it can't always happen. They get a call before day one from their hiring manager, from their line manager, who says, hey, really glad you're joining the business. Meet me at 9 o'clock in reception. Our dress code is this. Do you know how many people turn up suited and booted to business casual? It's scary, and it's really off-putting for that poor person that's rocked up in a brand new suit and it's business casual. They get an invite out to lunch on your first day. Hey, don't bother about bringing your cling film sandwiches. We're going to take you out to lunch on your first day. Might not be amazing, and it's not going to be the Ivy, but we'll take you somewhere. On day one, the question again, how was your first day? Your line manager meets where they said they were going to be on that day. How many hiring managers forget they've got a new starter and the only thing that reminds them is reception? No, I've got George in reception for you. George? IT, I need a computer. It happens all the time. They've got their kit ready. They get an orientation, an intranet tour. They're told where everything is. They're given a frequently asked questions document. They have a one-to-one with their new hiring manager who goes through objectives and goals and their structured induction plan. At 30 days, how have you settled in? Do you feel part of the business? Bit of a one-to-one? How's it all going? Did you meet these people? A recap on the goals? Do they need to be reset? You fully understand your role and your place in the team. Any feedback for me as your manager? Let's get the feedback and let's keep using it. At 45 days, a midway review with the manager, resetting of goals. You know, it's communication, it's touching, it's those touch points in that person's boarding process. And then at 90 days, a probation review, if it's that period or whatever, you know, whenever it is, but a structured probation review that covers all the points that you may already have in policy, but let's make sure that they're happening. So I know that what I've just said is nirvana, right? But it can't always happen. So let's factor in temporary workers, 1.3 million of them, I think, in the UK. that takes me back to the question of who owns onboarding, because co-employment, you don't want to own onboarding for temporary staff, right? But let's factor in things like home workers, field workers, mobility engineers, for example, call centres. Is it feasible that you can take people out to lunch all the time? You just can't do it, particularly when you're looking about volume environments. But what I could say to you is a £5 pret-a-manger lunch voucher on their desk waiting for them when they come, hey, have lunch on us. Imagine how you'd feel if you were a call centre worker on 17.5 grand. You rock up on first day, you got a frequently asked questions document, and slipped inside is, hey, here's your lunch on us for the first day. Don't get pret if they're 200 miles away, M&S or whatever. The offer then suddenly loses its value if there's no pret nearby. Where we do see a process in place, we're in a place where we see improvements. We see an improvement in retention in those first 90 days and 6 months. We see an improvement in brand and EVP. And it isn't that I'm saying that attrition rates are going to be mended, because in some cases we want that natural churn of talent, just as Peter said. It's not always a negative to have attrition rates. But what I am saying is, if you've worked so hard and you're classifying people as talent when you're looking for them, treat them as talent when you found them. So I'll leave you with my question again, because I do it all the time. Is candidate onboarding a standalone topic on your agenda? And if it isn't, I ask you to reconsider and take a long-term view on what your talent attraction strategy, when onboarding is failing in so many areas. Clearly I missed a word there, but you know what I mean. So I'm doing a masterclass later, and I really welcome you to join. Come and share your ideas and take away or not whatever you're thinking about this. I think it's a really important subject. I'm passionate about it, and I stick to my notes so I don't go off-piste and get on my soapbox. But thank you for your generosity and laughing at my weak jokes.